What is shadow work? I've been asked this question quite a few times in my spiritual practices as well as in my videos. And it's something different for everybody, but the simple definition is when you come face to face with any dark side of yourself. Now, we all have dark, we all have light. It's yin and yang, and both are necessary to have a complete whole self. The dark side is basically parts of ourselves that we might have rejected, that might have been fragmented through a traumatic experience or through a painful realization or just a painful path. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to the Pixie Palace. We are here for another Mindful Monday, and while it's a bit of a deeper topic, I did want to wish you a very happy week. I hope all is going well, despite all the craziness in the world, as I always say, and even in the markets have been chaotic. But today we're going to get into something a little bit deeper, kind of ignore that aspect for a while. And I really felt it was important to bring to the table because I've been asked the question of what is shadow work. Shadow work is a very familiar term for a lot of people, but there are a lot of others that are not familiar with this. We have all dealt with this in one form or another throughout our lives, and some of us are starting to come to terms with this philosophy. Shadow work is basically working on the darker sides of ourselves. If you were ever told you don't have a dark side, ignore that. We all have a dark side. We all have various layers to our beings. And that's the way the human experience is. It's our soul, the body that we're in, as well as all the conditioning that we've all gone through the course of our lives, as well as all the experiences we've had that have made us who we are today. And in this present moment, while I'm very happy with who I am, I wasn't always in that perspective. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. We all have aspects of our lives that we feel really good about who we are. We're in alignment. Things are going well in our lives. Even if there's one difficult situation in our lives, we can get through it really well with a really good perspective. But there are other times in our lives that it's not exactly that rosy. That's part of life. We deal with the dark times in the best ways we know how. And I think 2020 was a big example of that for many of us. It was a life changer for many. And in that year, I did a lot of shadow work. And shadow work means working on yourself, working on the ignored or traumatized, or even just dark sides of yourself. We all have fragments within us. We all have different ways of relating to ourselves and dealing with negative experiences. Some of us have been traumatized in our childhood. Some of us have been traumatized in a relationship or a marriage. Maybe a traumatic event like a robbery or a crime of some sort. Or maybe just a realization that we weren't ready for at that time. It could be a whole bunch of things. But whatever it is to that person is unique to that individual. For me personally, I've had a couple of situations with this. I had a very good childhood. I was very, very fortunate to be in a very strong family environment. And both of my parents are married. They're still together. They love one another. I have several brothers who are just amazing. And I've been very, very fortunate with that. I went through a lot of medical things in my life. And while that was very trying and very difficult to go through, I'm very thankful I did because it prolonged my life. It gave me the quality of life I have right now, and it actually allowed me to understand others who are going through a similar path. So I'm very grateful for that. So it wasn't, even though it may have been traumatic at the time, I was able to deal with that and process through those fears because I had the support I needed. I knew my own self-worth, and it really, really helped knowing those two things were intact to be able to get through all that. Fast forward to my first marriage. I was married twice. One ended in divorce, and the second one, unfortunately, passed away, which I've touched on before. The first marriage was very chaotic. I was at a point where I didn't have the self-confidence I have right now. And while I still struggle with aspects of that, like we all do, I am very much more in alignment with who I truly am now. At that time, I always had the illusion marriage was the answer. I've always been a romantic type of person, still am, but I was very naive with a lot of perspectives I had at the time. So I went into this marriage thinking this was for keeps. As long as I did my part, it would be a loving union that would last for the rest of my life. I don't think a lot of us go into that. A lot of us, unless it's like an arranged marriage or a marriage for some sort of mutual purpose, when it's a marriage of love, you don't go into it thinking it's going to end, of course. So as time went on, the relationship became very destructive. At first it was very slow. Signs were kind of pointing to it, but it was very easy to ignore because it was always easy to take upon myself. And being an empath, I had a lot of these things where I've had the misconception where, well, no, I need to do the work on myself. I need to be compassionate to this man's needs and his perspectives, and understand that he went through a traumatic childhood, which he did. Just really be super understanding, maybe more so than the average person. And while that was good and well for a while, I started losing sight of myself. It wasn't physically abusive until the very end, but it became more and more emotionally abusive, verbally abusive as the years went on. And this was over a 10-year span. And before anybody says anything, unless you've been truly through it, it's really hard to understand why someone would be in a relationship that's destructive for so long. But when you're the person in it, you don't always see what is going on right away. You also start bargaining with yourself and even with them that it's probably your fault and that maybe, you're exaggerating things in your own mind and you're not seeing things correctly as they are. So as time went on, the control factors started coming in, and it got to the point where I couldn't do anything on my own because I was not to be trusted. I couldn't even go out for a cup of coffee with a friend because I would be cheating. Just all kinds of weird mind games and all that. And it really made me lose perspective of who I was as a person and an individual. And partly it was my fault because I allowed it to go on for so long. But I got through the point where I finally realized I couldn't blame myself entirely because I knew what I knew at that time. I was looking for acceptance. I was looking for completion. And later on, I realized no one can complete me except for me. And these were a couple of the epiphanies I made through the shadow work. But it took many years for me to work through all these things, to really face the fear that I had inside. And it really colored a lot of aspects of my life, not just the actual relationship. It actually colored so much of my life that I was doubting myself in everything. I was not feeling good about who I was. I didn't even really know who I was. I was being something everybody else wanted me to be. And it was a really hard, tough lesson. I was fortunate when I met my second soon-to-be husband after several years. He helped me have a safe haven to really work on myself and really dig in and see what all of this trauma was actually stemming from. And it all went back to going through the medical things, which I thought I let go of, it wasn't that I didn't have the support. It wasn't that the medical things weren't necessary. It was definitely all necessary, and I always had the support. But there was something inside of me that triggered that I had to be strong all the time, that I had to be what everybody else wanted, regardless if it was abandoning myself. Hence comes my abandonment issue. And the thing I finally realized is I was abandoning myself. Nobody was abandoning me. And just making that revelation was really, really interesting. So sometimes when we actually deal with a traumatic issue, or when we have an experience that hurts us so deeply, our mind or our ego will compensate for that. It will try to protect us. Sometimes it'll block out the memories. Sometimes it'll put up a wall so you don't feel anything, even if you remember it. Sometimes it will push it to the back burner so you can get on with your future and get on with your life. There's so many coping mechanisms that aren't really healthy for you that seem to automatically happen. And as we move forward in our lives, we tend to forget it, even though it's always there. It's a part of us. And that's who makes us who we are today. And I think it's really interesting that shadow work is so necessary, especially nowadays. More of us are looking within. More of us are starting to almost examine parts of ourselves that aren't aligning. And I'm not going to lie, shadow work is painful, and it depends on what degree it is. Some of us have simple, minor triggers, not less important, but maybe they're a little easier to process and quicker to get through and really transmute. Some of us have very deep wounds that will take a long time to heal, and sometimes maybe a lifetime. And those type of traumatic experiences that we need to work through usually need some sort of help, like counseling, maybe even psychologist, or some type of therapist. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. If that's what you need to acknowledge that part of yourself and really work through those things to better yourself, do it. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. It matters what you think. Remember, that's the most important opinion, is yours. So, the interesting thing I've been battling with is this abandonment issue has been cropping up in a couple of things lately. And it's really interesting now that I made this part of the video. I made the epiphany just a minute ago. Because when we do shadow work, that's doing light work. That's transforming ourselves into a better version and being able to serve others and help one another out there.